What's the matter?
Oh, it's Ferris.
What? What's wrong?
What's wrong? For Christ's sake, look at him, honey.
So to kick off our back to school season, we actually were a little bit early with one of our school releases, which was Ferris Bueller in our first season. So as a special treat, we're actually going to be re-releasing this episode for the first time in video version. Michelle has graced us with an absolutely fantastic costume. If you have the chance to take a look on video, even for a minute, it's worth it. And if you have already listened to this episode, definitely listen to it again, because we're actually going to be adding our this or that segment, which we started in the last season or so. So please check it out. And in this special episode, we have a guest on, and it's not Ferris. It's the only other person that I really know who loves this movie as much as I do. So Thomas, welcome to the pod. You're kind of the first ever real guest on this podcast, so no pressure whatsoever.
Thanks for having me.
As you saying, this is one of your favorite movies of all time. Why is it so important to you, and what are your first memories of this movie entering your life?
It's among my favorite movies, but it's definitely the movie that I've seen the most times in my life. My story with this movie is that growing up, my mom was very strict with like what movies I could watch, and like wasn't allowed to watch like R-rated movies or PG, even like PG-13 movies when I was like a little kid. But she did know and love the movie Ferris Bueller, and I was at my aunt's house, and she like let me watch it, and it was like a big deal that I was gonna watch like a kind of an adult movie. And I watched it, and I just remembered like standing and watching it, and like standing really close to the screen, and just like thinking it was so funny and weird, and like the way that he talks to the camera was like the first time I'd ever seen that in a movie. And it's just one of those funny, charming movies. All the music in it too really stuck with me as a kid. And as a younger teenager, you know, I started making movies with my friends, and I was definitely like inspired by Ferris Bueller and the way that that movie is edited together and has all these funny music moments. And that definitely inspired me in anything that I ended up doing in high school and college as I was making films. I think it's still pretty funny to this day, and then pretty much a universally beloved movie among most people. Like most people that you talk to, I think really like this movie. I think one of the better 80s high school movies from the John Hughes era.
I don't, Michelle, do you remember the first time watching this movie?
I don't, but I don't think that it was until I was older. I feel like maybe the first time I watched this was when I was in college. Most of my memories or associations I have with this movie are with my college roommate. I mean, it's one of the movies that we used to quote all the time. I definitely owned the VHS. I feel like I've probably also watched it, maybe not up to 50, but probably somewhere in the 20 to 30 range. But it was pretty condensed to, I'd say, my college years and maybe right after that. So I probably only seen it a couple times since, which was nice because watching it last night felt very like fresh, and that I could, you know, really appreciate it.
I don't have any memory of watching this for the first time. I just feel like it's one of those movies that I've seen over and over again, that I know frontwards to back. And watching it again yesterday, I was like, I guess from the other movies that we're covering in this season, it definitely wasn't a movie we kind of like sat and watched as a family, but everyone has seen it. I don't know if mom and dad really watched it with us much. I think it was more among the four of us being excited about it. But I think as I watched it recently, actually the last time I watched it before last night was when I was on a trip, my first trip to Chicago, and Dom was watching it on the plane. So I was like, oh, this is perfect that I'm watching it right now. It felt very like serendipitous. But it's weird that I don't, as this being one of my favorite movies, I don't really have like a nostalgic tie to the first time that I've seen it.
You brought up a great point that the four of us, like our sisters, all like quote this to each other, but I don't really have very many memories of us all sitting down to watch it together.
Thomas, is this something that growing up in your teenage years that you feel like you watch with your friends a lot?
I do have specific memories of friends in high school, like me and this kid that I was friends with like in middle school and high school, but that I've totally lost touch with now. But to this day, I think of him when we used to do like in Spanish class, like do bow bow. Like we used to just do that to each other like in school, and just like think and quote other Ferris stuff, and like It was definitely big in my family too. Like my parents like quote stuff constantly to each other, and like they went to high school together in the 80s, and so like they just quoted The Breakfast Club and this movie and like Stripes like just to each other and to their children like all the time. So I just like absorbed so many of these quotes just by being around them. That was just like a big part of our familial, like the way we converse was to be like quoting Ferris Bueller and like Seinfeld.
I feel like among my friends, not a lot of people have loved this movie or have seen it. Maybe they've seen it once or twice, but I feel like it's universally loved and it's such a cultural like connection, I think, among people who've like grown up in the 90s because, if your parents grew up during this era, it's obviously important to them. But I bet there's so many things that people influence from this movie, but they don't even realize that it's coming from this, or they like a movie that's similar to this, but they don't actually realize it was coming from John Hughes. Thomas, are there any movies that you think were influenced by this that you really like?
To me, every time I see someone look at the camera, I think of Ferris Bueller because that was the moment that the fact that you could break the fourth wall like was exposed to me through this movie. But yeah, I don't know if I think of any that feel like would be a successor or inspired by this movie. It's a pretty singular movie. Like it almost shouldn't plot wise. Like I don't even know how you would try to replicate this movie because it's sort of just this like adventure where they just go out and there's not like a clear like plot structure necessarily, and the characters are also unique and like real within this movie.
As I was watching it last night, I was thinking the same thing, that how well breaking the fourth wall works in this movie, because there's a lot of TV shows, there's a lot of movies that try that and it becomes super obnoxious. A lot of people are annoyed by Fleabag because she breaks the fourth wall, but that's my favorite show of all time. So, I mean, clearly I have some type of affinity for breaking the fourth wall if they're able to execute it right. But I can't really think of something that's anything like this movie. It's so original and unique in its own way. I also think it speaks just to how well all these actors performed in this movie. I don't think it could have been cast any better. Even the supporting actors, the parents just being so aloof with everything, they play that so well. And I think it's really, important, aside from we spend most of our time with Sloane, Cameron, and Ferris, but all the supporting actors, I feel like, really make this movie what it is.
The parents are underratedly hilarious in this movie. All their line deliveries, and it's like so over the top. The two scenes when in the beginning when he's like just pretending to be like a baby to them and they're just eating it up. Apparently those people like were married in real life, like the two actors that play his parents, which is also just funny.
The reason that sequence works so well of favoritism over a child is because I feel like every family can relate to that in some way. If you're a 2-sibling family, Thomas, that you could probably have more connection to it. But I feel like it's such a universal feeling of parents clearly giving one of them a little bit more attention and letting them slide with everything, and then one person just getting pissed off that they're not allowed to do anything.
But they didn't get him a car. So
they didn't get him a car. They got him a computer. But is he supposed to be older, or is she supposed to be older? Because they don't really...
This is going to be one of the questions I was going to bring up, because he makes it very clear that he's going, like, he's a senior.
Yeah.
But she acts like she's older. But are they twins? I don't think so. So she must be younger.
Twins. I don't know, because the way they don't say, oh, for our birthday, we got this and he got this. But
good point.
It kind of makes they seem like they're the same age.
If they were twins and they got her a car and not him, that would be crazy. So it seems like she's older. She feels like older sisterly to him. But yeah, you're right, Michelle. Like he's a senior. So it doesn't make sense that she would be his old. How could she be older unless she was held back too?
Maybe they're Irish twins and somehow like they're both seniors, but were born like 11 months apart.
Apparently, like if you've ever seen like the trailer for this movie, there was like younger siblings that were cut out of the movie. There's like the scenes when they're in the kitchen, like there's like childish drawings on their fridge, and I was always like, is that supposed to be like Ferris Bueller's drawing? Like it looks like a 5-year-old did it. But yeah, apparently there was like a bigger family initially in the movie, and but they cut them out for like time.
I'm kind of happy they did because I think it put more of a spotlight on Jennifer Grey, and she's absolutely iconic in this. So I felt like she needed the platform to shine.
I have seen it so many times, but it has been like a good maybe 4 or so years. But in the recent years that I rewatch it, what always stands out to me is how like just how gorgeous every shot of this movie is, like from the symmetrical and the colors and just everything that is in the mise en scène of the frame, and every shot is like amazing. The way that when they're standing in the garage, like the lush green trees around in that garage with the red car, it's just like gorgeous to look at. And it strikes me when I watch this movie, just like the photography of it is like doesn't get enough credit. My favorite sequence of this movie is when they're doing the prank call to Rooney, and like I watch it, and every time I know like that's like my favorite part of the movie, and I anticipate it, and every time it completely satisfies me, and it reaffirms that it is just like a brilliant 5-minute stretch of filmmaking and editing and like tension building and music cue cutting, and just it's just a complete masterfully edited and put together sequence. At first, when he gets the call, you don't know that it's Cameron, and like you think that it is actually the dad. Then it doesn't reveal until, and then Ferris calls him and the other line, and you still think that it's like, oh my god, it is really the dad. And then when it finally reveals Cameron, like, well, I should say you do. It's just so funny, and it makes me laugh out loud like every single time. And the way it like pulls in on Rooney's face and like the dramatic music and everything, it's so wonderful.
That is by far my favorite scene. It gets me. I was hysterically laughing last night, and I know it's coming every time. I'm sad not remembering the first time I saw it, because that element of surprise and the way that it was so well thought out with all of the shots and giving that element of surprise. But I think also the thing that works so well in that sequence is when they reveal it's not him, and having Rooney's reaction just completely flustered, and him and Grace are trying to scramble to get it done. And there's like papers being thrown
Grace
everywhere.
making the Rooney noises.
She's just like, it's just it's so chaotic, but you're so locked in. But then also the other relationship on the other side of the phone, so between Ferris and Cameron, when they're fighting, and he's kind of like, well, I'm out of here, you're being such an asshole, and then just pulling back in, and you know their friendship so well. They're a married couple, and they've been through this so many times. And then they're just kind of sitting and drinking coffee together like after they make up. And I don't know what it is. It's so subtle, but it works so well every time. They look like such adults. He has a suit on, but Cameron took off his jersey, so he's wearing just like suspenders and a t-shirt, and just their entire interaction.
I loved reading last night that the actress who plays Grace improv'd that, like the mumbling, and I can definitely see those two actors like having the material and really just like having a lot of fun with it, going back and forth. I imagine that there were probably other improvs in there. But on the other end with Ferris and Cameron, I was really, I guess, impressed / surprised, not just like the surprise that it's Cameron doing it, but the scene prior to this is like he's in bed, he's like moaning when I wrote down, it's like, wow, Cameron really delivers on this. Like, Laura, you touched on their friendship. That is a great friend who's like, not only like, fine, I'll do this, but like, he's like, I'm going to do the voice. I'm going to go above and beyond. Even when they mess things up, he goes all in on it. And I appreciate people who do that.
It gets better. I think it gets better every time that I watch it.
Yeah, Cameron's a great wingman, and his commitment in that part is just amazing. It's sort of in line with this scene, but just an element that stuck out to me for the first time this time was just like the use of phones and landline phones. One, just to like, as it relates to the plot and like sort of the schemes that they get away with by using these like analog, like in his like setting the voicemail, the fake voicemail and all of that stuff, but also how they use like visually everyone's phone is sort of like this representation of their character. Like the sister's phone like has like her makeup out and like these little things around it, and then Cameron's phone is this like stainless steel kind of gray sleek phone, just like a cool way to show through editing like what the character, a little insight into the characters' lives, like through what their little setup of where their phone is. It's so dated now, but it was so cool.
I love that. I hadn't thought about that, about the phones kind of being characters and really matching up with each of them. And one little other phone tidbit I wrote down was just like payphone exclamation point, that they had this scene where, you know, just the students are like taking phone calls for Ferris, passing the phone off to someone else. And I think in our, you know, cell phone world right now, even though we grew up in a world that had payphones, it's still so, it's jarring enough to see a like an analog, like an old school phone, but then just to see a phone booth and to remember like, oh wow, like these things existed not that long ago, and this is how people had to communicate. And it was like totally like, I know that scene with the phone booths is kind of silly, but people still did that. Like when I was in high school, I didn't have a cell phone, and most of my friends, like, they needed their mom to come pick them up, they had to go use the payphone.
Back to what Thomas was saying too, one thing that I think because I was really paying attention is the production design. I feel like all the scene setting, their house is so well laid out. His room gives me so much anxiety because there's so much going on, and I almost like couldn't watch it because he just has so many random things up on the wall. The old computer, his blinds are really ugly, but it's such a representation, I think, of
his blinds.
Him. Do you know what I mean? It's just weird.
Like, why does he have these like orange and gray, like garbage bag looking blinds? Like, I was so confused by that as a kid. I'm like, what is he have, like a tent? Like, what
it looks like when it's getting fumigated for bugs or whatever it is, when you have like a infestation in your house. But I think also their house is so, everyone knew that family growing up that had that house. Do you know what I mean? Like that, maybe it was a little bit before our time because it was more 80s, but just the kitchen design and the scenes where Jeannie is just like running throughout the house, and you kind of get a little glimpse of all the different rooms. Like she has the white carpet, and like, I remember growing up and so many friends having that room. It felt like someone you knew, but it also, I think, did such a good job of representing the family. And then on the complete opposite spectrum, there's a lot of shots in the beginning of school and how absolutely it was just a straight up jail cell. And there's pretty much nothing in those classrooms. There's nothing hung up on the walls. The hallways itself look like a jail. Like there's this little peephole into all of the rooms when Ed Rooney is running. That's one of my favorite scenes where he's running and stops because he doesn't want to get in trouble for running. Oh my God. It's just so well done. But I think all of the way that they set it up is so important. The interactions that the characters are having, getting a little bit more feel for their personality and just their experiences in school, and just how horrific it was. Of course, they wanted to skip for a day. Especially in such a, you know, he says it's like, how could I possibly go to school on a day like this? It's just blue skies. Like Chicago, usually they're stuck inside for most of the winter. So I just think all those little details are not things that people maybe would realize the first time they're watching it, but the more you go back, you realize how perfectly crafted it was.
Any other things that stood out to you?
All the music editing really is just like, I don't know if there's any movie that I could even compare to it. Like how meticulous every sound effect and the way that the song ends and cues up with what you're watching, and like how the sound plays such an important role in the setting the tone of the characters and like the scene. Like when Cameron is in bed and the Cameron was in Egypt land part, and Ferris is like, it's cutting back and forth between them. And when it's Ferris, there's like this Hawaiian little music underneath. And when it's him, it's just like, boom, like droning thing. And it's just such a great way to like pull you back and forth between these two characters that are on such opposite ends of their day at that moment. Yeah, all the song choices are just like not what you'd always expect, but they're just sort of they're embedded in my memory in the way that like the scenes are just fused with the songs themselves in a way that is not always the case for movies. Like I can't think of some of the scenes without thinking of what the score is doing underneath it at any given time. And that definitely stood out to me.
I was gonna say that earlier, just talking about the beginning setup, when they're switching back and forth to the two of them, cutting that music, it could potentially not work well, but just the way that they did it, I don't know what it is, especially with the Hawaiian music. It gets me every time because he's like sipping a cocktail and he's in a Hawaiian shirt. He's sitting by the pool. So they kind of like morph the music and the set design just work so well together. But I think for the music too, even the very standout scenes of the parade, I was actually pleasantly surprised this time because I think after seeing it so many times and you know that the twist and shout is coming, you kind of know that it's coming, so you're not excited. But I felt really excited this time watching it. And it always uplifts you and puts you in a good mood. And all of the cuts of the crowd, I think, work so well because it just is a very like feel good moment and kind of takes a break from the corporateness of what's around, like people in office buildings or people at school. And I actually was thinking yesterday, I wonder if they just used random extras for that scene or if there like was a parade going on that they planned to film on that day. But it seemed like they were all just very real people.
I felt the same way about the parade scene. I was kind of almost like dreading. I'm like, oh, this is going to take forever. And I already know what happens. But it is one of those things. And I feel like there are a bunch of things in this movie that fall into this category, in which I feel like in other circumstances, I would be annoyed by it or just like bored. But for some reason, I don't know if maybe it was like one of the first movies to do it. And for that reason, I respect it more. But it just works. Like, I'm pretty sure after playing Dankeschön, where they didn't, maybe do the whole number, like, I think they played the entire Twist and Shout song. And there's, I love the choreographed kind of like an early flash mob type situation going on, and the parade. And I can't remember whether or not this is cut into that scene or if it happens right before it. I love the quietness and the sweetness of the scene with Cameron and Sloane walking together. I'm like, this is like such a perfect contrast. Two of the other things that I would put in that category of like, this would typically annoy me, but it works. We talked about like at the beginning, the breaking the fourth wall. I give it grace because it was one of the first to do it really well. And the other is the scene in the museum, which I think I always like it to my memory. I'm like, this is kind of like weird. And it is indulgent, but it's like, it's beautiful and it works. And there's so many different things happening in this movie where there are these really big, loud moments. There are these really small, funny moments, quiet moments. And they kind of establish that they're going to go into this and like do a bunch of different things, and somehow it's going to come out being cohesive.
It can be so loud and like Star Wars when they're driving in the car and like epically, like overly to the point of being funny, epic. And then like the littlest tiny moments. And yeah, that the museum scene and also the scenes of Chicago, these like two montages that happen in the movie, essentially, they're set to music that are great. But it's so rare. Like, I don't think of any other like 80s high school movies that have this like really artful sensibility to it. And that's, I think, what makes Ferris Bueller so special.
When I went to Chicago over the fall and just seeing the painting of the one that Cameron is staring back at, I don't know what it is at this age. You definitely connect to it, to what he's feeling in that moment a little bit more. And it's so weird. Last night, I never recognized it because I probably get up usually when I'm watching it, but just the image of the very, very, very zoomed in part of the painting, it takes up your whole screen, and it's kind of there for about 3 seconds. It's not like a quick flash. It's so weird, but it just works. You don't I think this whole movie is just full of moments of them trying weird things that haven't been done or have been done well and just completely owning it.
I always loved that really sort of is a small thing in the movie, but I always loved it, which is when they're on the top of the tall building looking down, and there's these two guys with these weird hats standing off to the right. And as a kid, I remember seeing that and being so confused and like expecting those guys to like somehow be like involved in the movie again later, or for that to be explained. And it is just totally not explained. But like, why even put it in there? Like, why shoot the shot with those two guys who have nothing to do with anything, that are just in these goofy hats? And I started to just have this whole thing in my head of like, I kind of just love that, because it forces you to like, if you're gonna pay attention to it, like kind of invent this whole story in your own head about like why those guys are in the scene with them, and like what were they doing on that day that led them to be at the top of this building at like 2:00 in the afternoon. The movie has a lot of moments where there's like, I don't know why something is a certain way or what that line explicitly means, but like the mystery of it almost is what makes it it gives it like some staying power, because like to this day I'll still never know what those two guys with the weird hats were doing in there.
It's so funny because watching it this time, I think this is the first time I ever noticed those guys in that shot.
I also had not noticed the hats until last night, but unlike you, Thomas, I demanded answers and spent quite a lot of time trying to figure out what their deal was. But I wish I had taken your approach of like, take it as a moment to be creative. But the answer that very deep in IMDb that whoever wrote this gave was that those two guys were going to the parade later, and they were wearing very like German type hats.
There you go.
That. There you go. It was a little bit of foreshadowing. But very subtle and not super important, but they probably just did it. I think actually to that point, one thing that I did notice, and I think I have noticed it before, but I found more examples of it going back to the music and just how it's seamlessly integrated, but including Danke Shay throughout the whole movie in little instances. So you find different characters singing it or humming it, and then it's just kind of leading to this. So Ferris sings it in the shower, and then Jeannie towards the end sings it, but Rooney is standing in front of the house whistling it. And then they have the parade scene, and it's just tied so well together to kind of lead up to this really special moment that it was almost a score in itself without playing in the background. They made the characters do it.
Yeah, I love the recurring Danke Shay use, and it's funny. So this is probably among my favorite movies like of all time, and then one of my other favorite movies of all time is this movie called The Long Goodbye. It's from like 1973. It's like an old movie, but it's a movie where there's basically one song, and they play it in different ways throughout the movie. So every time you hear music in the movie, it's the same song but done in like a different way, and it just sort of ties the universe of the movie together and makes it feel like this self-contained little world. And it's another thing that I love about Ferris is that like there's this feeling that like all the characters are connected in this weird way, even though Rooney and Ferris essentially spend no time together, and most of them are like it's through these phone conversations, and they're kind of all on their own adventure that is tied together, and the song sort of helps add to the feeling that they're all going through the same like universe in this weird way. So I absolutely love that.
Should we talk about what we did not like?
I think Ferris in general as a character and sort of his worldview, I guess, and like the overall like 80s kind of consumer culture politics of the movie stuck out to me this time, because like I've seen it a million times, so all the jokes like are just I've already thought through and everything. But watching it like as an adult and as someone like now in this time with like just consumer culture feeling like unbearable at times with like Instagram ads and just like being followed by Facebook ads and stuff all the time, it is it's weird. Like economics is like sort of another theme in this movie that is sort of this like backseat theme. I mean, obviously like all of like the scenes with the teacher giving the economic lectures are like hilarious, but yeah, it's just like Ferris is sort of this, on this time watching it for the first time, I saw him through the lens of like sort of like an upper middle class kid that just sort of has all this stuff. Like he just has all these toys in his room, but he's still pretty bored. And so he has to like create his own fun by like making this whole crazy adventure happen. It's just like he's not really a good person. Like he's kind of like a manipulative liar of a person. And like, so like, I guess the overall thing I'm saying is like, yeah, my feeling about Ferris and about like whether he's like a good hero that you should be like inspired by or like a little like suspicious of, because both in the way that he like sort of just lies to everyone and weirdly associates romance with like the stock market, because like when he takes his girlfriend and his best friend to the stock market, he's like looking out at all the floor, and then he comes back, he's like, you want to get married? Like so he just like had this, he came off as this like ultimate like Reagan era like kid that was just gonna become like a Wall Street like psychopath to me, that which I never fully, like as a kid you'd think he's like the fun friend that you want to have, but I kind of saw it this time as more like, oh god, like what is this Ferris Bueller guy like up to? And like, you know, he's kind of has a lot of questionable moments that I think like rubbed me the wrong way more than they ever did on this watch.
Maybe it's a different perspective being a girl, but I think between the two friends, I would identify more as being the Cameron. Like, I'm not going to be the one, the instigator. I'm going to be the one that gets dragged along. So I think I always kind of like didn't like Ferris for that reason. Like, I had a negative connotation with like, oh my God, like this guy's like causing all this trouble. I'm also very much like a rule follower. And he's spending the entire movie breaking rules, and that, you know, it's entertaining, but like, in real life, I would hate to have a friend like Ferris.
Growing up watching it, I feel like I never looked at Ferris in a negative light because I think I was younger and I wasn't looking at it as more like a responsible approach. The scenes that I actually, it's more so when the movie starts to kind of, it starts to go down, not in a bad way, just kind of starts to level off when they bring the car back. And like Cameron has that really emotional scene, which I love and I think it's really important. But I just get so mad when he wrecks the car and he's like, don't worry about it. Like, I'll take the fall for you, as if it's going to solve everything. Like Cameron's still going to, like I think he's just very narrow-minded and thinks that the world revolves around him, that he doesn't realize how horrible the aftermath of that's going to be. And, you know, I'm just being, you know, a rule follower myself too. I'm just thinking about the repercussions that were going to happen after that. And it still bothers me every time I watch it. I don't even know how Cameron is so even keeled about it. I think he's just still in shock, but I'm like, dude, that is hundreds of thousands of dollars that you just.
It's very stressful.
It's so stressful. And the glass too. Like that was an expensive room to build, not just the car. Oh my God, it stresses me out so much. I'm like, there has to be a different way they could have figured out those miles. Or couldn't they have parked it in a nicer area so they didn't have to risk someone driving it off? I don't know. There's so many.
How do you guys think the conversation between Cameron and his dad went later that day?
I think it's so powerful that they never show Cameron's parents, because I kind of just picture his dad as this dark looming just shadow sitting behind a desk in a very white wall empty room and only drinking like ice water. I don't know why. Like I just see him as this very, but I think it adds power to him that they just talk about how scary and intimidating and what a horrible person he is without actually showing him, because they easily could have included him in a scene where he's, you know, yelling at him to get up for school or something like that. I think that works really well, because you just have this image in your head. I actually don't want to think about the conversation, because sadly I genuinely picture him beating him up physically, like not just having, like, come on, just the way that they describe him, it's terrifying.
I think in real life, it would maybe be closer to that based on the information that we have. But I think if a movie, it seems like the way the movie was setting it up was that this really big catastrophe was like needed to happen in order for this father and son to have like a real conversation and maybe to mend their relationship somehow. Like maybe not overnight, but that it would be a step in the right direction for Cameron's growth.
Yeah, I mean, and Cameron really is the best character. I mean, one of the better, like, more fully formed characters with the strongest, like, arc. I mean, him and Jeannie are kind of the real characters that go through a change. Like, Ferris essentially doesn't change in the movie. He just gets away with everything and then gets saved in the nick of time by both of the people that he kind of screws over. Like, he screws over Jeannie and Cameron by stealing his dad's car and, like, being, like, an annoying younger brother to Jeannie. But then at the end, they both end up falling on their own sword to help Ferris.
I have conflicting feelings about the way, because Ferris he cares about him. You can see that. And just the way that he talks to the camera about him, he's worried about him because he's concerned about him not really having direction and him falling in love with someone and being treated like shit. And I think as any normal friend, you know, he wants to like make sure that he's okay. I think that in spite of all the other horrible things that he does care about him. But I actually just love the way that we're told so much about Cameron without words. Like even the scene where they're in the French restaurant, I think Ferris is talking to the camera and they just kind of show shots of Cameron trying to function in an expensive restaurant, and like Ferris is chewing ice, but then Cameron is just kind of doing all this weird stuff like coughing and taking medicine, and you know he's just a kid. Like he just is trying to be a person. He's just a person at the end of the day, even though he has all these anxieties and things that he worries about. But I think he just has all these cute quirks too, and you just want to give him a hug and, you know, take him out for lunch and tell him that everything's gonna be okay.
But I think we're supposed to think that like Cameron secretly wanted to take it out, or
yeah.
Well, have you guys heard of the like Fight Club theory about this movie?
No.
That like, have you heard of it, Michelle?
I've heard of it, but remind us. Or
it's not a real theory, but it's a way of looking at the movie that like Cameron is the main character and he invented Ferris as like a Tyler Durden type of like alter ego that like has the girlfriend that he wants and like the parents that he wishes he had. And if you look at the movie like that, it's kind of a fun way to movie on. And on that theory, for the first time I'm like, oh, this is a small little piece of ammo for that. Like he has the number 9 jersey and he was absent 9 times.
Oh.
Conspiracy territory here, I know, but
wow.
Do you know why else I think that really works though, or that theory holds up, is because of what you said about the character growth. I mean, when we look at a protagonist, we're looking to see where they start, what they learn, where they end up, and Ferris kind of doesn't do that, but Cameron does. So if he is the main character, then that totally works.
Oh my God, I love that. Now I need to rewatch it with that mindset, because it's even almost getting like a fake phone call to say, get out of bed, like get over here, come on, let's do something fun, versus him just laying in bed, like quote unquote sick all day.
Yeah, and then he always wanted to stick it to his dad, but Ferris kind of had to push him over the edge.
Yeah.
Literally push the car over the edge.
Push the car. I feel like we didn't really talk about some of the supporting actors too much, but are there any that are your favorite, or you would, for both of you, or get rid of entirely?
I mean, the secretary and Rooney, Grace, the character, yeah. She is just like dynamite in every single line delivery, and like what a little asshole. Like that's what just every little line with the Chicago accent. I think the French restaurant guy is like also perfectly cast and like hilariously the snotty guy.
Oh my God, it's so good. I also love she has such good physical comedy too. The first time we meet her, she's pulling pencils out of her hair. She doesn't even have a line. This is the first time we see her in a scene. She has 3 pencils falling out of her hair, and she's always scratching her head, but she also knows what's going on. I love her whole description of all the different guys who love Ferris. I thought that was so clever. Michelle, what about you? Is there anyone that's your favorite, or you think isn't necessary in the movie?
No, I don't. I feel like this cast is like exactly the right size. Um, when I think about his parents, there's not really much substance to them, but I think that that's supposed to kind of be the point. Like you know, Ferris is their son, and he's gonna like kind of dominate. I'm sure he dominates their family, not just like in this story, but like in any other story that would be told about this family. I have no like characters that I would get rid of, but I do have. Can I share my like what I would change or what I didn't like? I should say. So earlier on, we talked about how one of the things we really liked about this movie is that it's dynamic and it does all these different things. But there's one small scene where we hear Jeannie's inner monologue, and it's when she's sitting in the school, and we kind of get that what you described, Laura, is that like the stark white building. It almost in that scene specifically feels a little bit like more like an asylum, and I don't know, it didn't work for me. It was like maybe one too many things, and maybe it was just because they did it once and didn't repeat it. And I love her throughout the entire movie, but like I didn't like that.
And she's also not talking because it's just in her head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I didn't like about it. Yeah,
I think it was just kind of unnecessary. That felt more like a cop out to give her character a little bit more complexity, that she is wondering, okay, maybe Ferris isn't a bad person. I'm being too hard on him, because the whole movie so far we've been introduced as their relationship, that she absolutely hates him and loathes everything that he does and is jealous that everyone likes him. So I think it was a kind of a way of showing, or maybe it was a way to foreshadow that she will end up being compassionate towards him in the end, but she needed, her lover at the police station, Charlie Sheen, to also great supporting actor. Yeah. Absolutely amazing. Also just the multiple people who show up at the house while Ferris is quote unquote sick, or bringing flowers, and I think they're all really well cast, even though they just
is one of them a prostitute? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
What's implied with that lady that's like, there's two guys with balloons.
Did you guys notice how creepy they are? The guys standing behind the prostitute, they're just kind of looking at her like they're insane. I never noticed that before. And one of them has on a really creepy mask.
Yes, the one in the back, like the back left. Yeah.
But who are we supposed to think sent him this prostitute? Like, what?
I don't know. I think that ongoing joke though works so well. The first time Rooney shows up and he gets the flowers, and it's from the English department.
And like the cop knows that, and like there's like the water tower. Like,
I feel like the scenes were necessary for the movie, but I had to pick, like, if I were going to pick a new scene to get up and go to the bathroom during, it would be like all the scenes with like Rooney trying to break into the house. That kind of like, I don't know, I got bored with it, but I did have a thought in watching it this time. Just so John Hughes wrote the script for this.
I think so, yeah.
And also wrote the script for Home Alone. And this is the first time in watching this where I thought, oh my, like, okay, so John Hughes clearly has a thing for like pranks and break-ins and, using the dog door. Like, so many of the things that happen in this movie happen again in Home Alone.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue, did Kevin McAllister grow up to be Ferris Bueller? Maybe. I actually do really enjoy the scene though where he sticks his head through the dog door and the dog is foaming at the mouth, because it's such a scary dog. It's
but also
really
like,
scary dog.
Where was that dog before, like when Ferris was home? I was like, where did it, like, I had forgotten there was a dog in it, and when I saw the dog door I was like, there must be a dog in this, but like, why is this the first we're hearing of him? I don't know, that annoyed me.
Also kind of messed up that he throws a flower pot on his head. I mean,
he knocks the dog out with like a ceramic flower pot, right? That's what we're.
I thought that he was trying to poison the dog. Like at first, I was like, "Oh my god, does he kill this dog? Like, did I not remember this?" And he didn't, obviously. But
you talking about how bad Ferris is, we should also talk about how horrible Ed Rooney is as a person. But I think it's more, he's just like a really bad person, and just every line that he says is so carefully crafted and it works so well, but he sounds so above you. He tries to use big words to make him sound like he's so much smarter. And what did he say? I didn't work this hard to like get into this position. Okay, let's calm
Have
down.
some snot-nosed kid leaving my cheese out in the wind. Something I wrote down though, actually, about Rooney right in the beginning is what you were saying. Like one of the earliest scenes, like he calls Ferris Bueller's mom and tells her that her son is like a lying con man, and that like you have to wake up and smell the coffee because your son is lying to you. Like, if a principal did that to like somebody's mom, like that would never go over. Like, it's insane that he calls her up and just tells her that.
I mean, aside from when he has his tail between his legs during the Sloan debacle, other than that, he pretty much talks to everyone like they are absolute trash. And he spends so much time at that house. What are you trying to
accomplish? Takes off a full day of work to like just break in and hang out at this kid's house.
I will say, Michelle, I know you don't like those scenes, but I think for character, more so physical development, to see him starting off in the office picking dust off his desk and trying to be all proper, and then to the end of just where he is showing up on the bus just completely disheveled, broken shoes, ripped pants, covered in mud, bloody lip, the like makeup behind turning him into just looking like absolute shit by the end, I think works really well. And it was kind of necessary to have those scenes.
One of the things I noticed, I'm not saying this is like a bad thing, but like, I think that if this movie was made today, everyone would have like very clear skin and like all the girls would have eyelashes and everyone would look great. Every kid in this movie, like in high school and on the bus, are like really, I don't know the right word to use here, real raw. Like they have acne and their hair is a mess. Like they're not very well maintained individuals.
The sequence where they show the kids' faces with their mouths open, Thomas, your parents growing up during that time period, they probably knew people who had those hairstyles, or maybe just felt like that when they were sitting in school. That would be so awesome if your parents were cameos in that movie.
Those kids,
I wish you knew his parents, Michelle, because they're.
I'm picturing them like still looking like very 80s. Based on just this conversation.
Yeah. All you know my parents is that they like love the 80s and like these two 80s movies. Yeah, the casting of all the like the background students and like those kids that he talks to on the phone, like the freshman that he like lies to randomly about like his illness in the beginning. And like when the kid's collecting the stuff with the coin and like the little jar, it makes it like as I rewatch this movie over the years, I always think like I want to like spend more time in the world of this movie in the parts that are not when Ferris isn't there. Like it feels so rich and like real. Like, oh, even if he's not in the scene, like there's a whole world of these students in the school that's going on, and like these kids at the arcade, and it's like it's just it's the whole background world of this movie is very well created.
Did they already do this? I think this could have been a TV show.
They
definitely
did.
A series. They tried it, right?
I think it had Jennifer Aniston in it.
Oh wow!
As Jeannie.
But not making it Ferris. What if they just did it the high school and it was all the supporting characters? He's off in college.
Well, I think they shot this movie at the same school as The Breakfast Club, so there's like these happen in like the same sort of high school universe. So I could imagine all those kids from The Breakfast Club being like somewhere in some classroom while this is happening.
Oh, I would
someone
love
should try
that.
and remake this as a series, but
set in the 80s, yeah.
But
that
make
would be
it
awesome.
really tasteful and not because sometimes when they try and do episode spin-offs, I don't know, it just doesn't work well. Imagine they have all the same cool photography and sequences, but just in a limited series.
I would have
Thomas,
loved
I think you should
Thomas, this is your project.
This is it.
This is your time to shine.
Gotta get the rights.
Yeah.
I would have loved to see. Maybe I'll write a spin-off about Rooney and his secretary because their dynamic is so funny. Just like this secretary that's constantly undermining him and like kind of just doesn't even fully realize that but she also kind of does know that she's like twisting the knife in him when she like says little things like, "You still want his daytime then?" It's just so this. I wish that could be 2 hours of just them in and off, like, or that could be a season of a show where it's just like him getting flustered by her in the office.
We didn't really talk that much about Sloane, and I didn't really have anything. I think she was just well cast for this. She was kind of perfect for the part, but I also kind of wish that they gave her a little bit more of a stage to shine, because she's kind of just placed in the background as the girlfriend who is clearly like cool. She's a cheerleader. She wants to kind of go along with everything. She's very relaxed, I would say, throughout the whole movie, despite all these insane situations she's in. Like I kind of aspire to be more like that I would be willing to do something more spontaneous without freaking out. But what do you guys think?
I kind of feel the same. I don't feel like they really gave her much to work with. And she did, I think that the actress did great. And maybe it's kind of supposed to be in that same vein as the parents where, not that she's boring, but I think that Ferris and Cameron's relationship is supposed to be at the center of this, and that his relationship with Cameron is probably more important than his relationship with her. And she's beautiful.
I think she's too good for Ferris. Just throwing it out there.
Definitely.
He asked her to marry him at the stock exchange in front of his best friend, sort of impromptu. And then, she's like, oh, he's going to marry me. But then, he goes, when he's running home, he just sees, two sunbathing women, and just goes in back and is like, hey, I'm Ferris Bueller. And he's like, Ferris just strikes me as someone who's pretty, he has a lot of relationships with a lot of different people all over the map, and all these freshmen know him. He gets them out of summer school, but then he says about Cameron he'll go to one college and I'll go to another, and basically that will be it. He doesn't Sloane is the only he says oh, let's get married, and when he talks to the camera he's like, I would get married, I would marry her. He wants it both ways, I guess, with her. But she's kind of a pretty, underdeveloped character in terms of she's kind of like Ferris's girlfriend in this movie.
The scenes where she does shine is when they're pulling her out of school, and just the whole sequence of her knowing and putting on the jacket and just those little subtleties and totally playing the part of acting upset, and then having that experience with Ed where she's kind of giving him a little bit of love so that he feels better about this. She calls him Ed. You're a beautiful man. Also, one thing we didn't talk about, because I think Cameron sort of includes this a little bit. He has this weird accent for Sloane's dad, but she puts on almost this European accent sometimes throughout the movie, and I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's a purposeful inflection.
Yeah, and something Cameron does a kind of Chicago-y accent when he's doing her dad on the phone, but then when Ferris comes, he does the British hurry along now, the Cary Grant accent.
Oh
I picture her dad being more the way that Ferris is portraying him, as a guy that would basically dress up as Inspector Gadget and have a long cloak and a hat.
Okay, so I feel like we should cut into our favorite lines.
Do I have to go first? I'm sorry. There's a million lines.
Oh my God, you're fine. Michelle, what about you? If you feel like you have one queued up?
I think that my two favorite lines are really tied to favorite scenes. The shower scene, I think, is my runner-up favorite to the Grace and Ed, Cameron and Ferris phone scene. I think it's a really strong scene to have right at the beginning of the movie, where, we're kind of establishing that this is going to be really silly. But his whole monologue, I could be the walrus, I'd still have to bum rides off people, I think that is my favorite line within that sequence. But the entire thing, him, covering up the screen when he's in the shower, it's brilliant. The cutting is great. The fact that they go in the shower and then he's in his towel afterwards, it's just It's perfect.
With your bad knee, Ed, you shouldn't throw anybody. I mean, that is one of my, just all of her lines are really just like, they work as one line, like just in a bubble. That line is just as funny. And then, like, I mean, life moves pretty fast. You don't stop. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you might miss it. It's sort of like the ultimate line of this movie. That was the runner-up for what I was going to put as my high school yearbook quote.
What was your high school yearbook quote? What beat that?
I panicked in the last minute, and I wrote the line from Back to the Future, which is, "Where we're going, we don't need roads."
Oh, I like that better.
And I feel like it's pretty relevant to like your next leaving high school and going into college.
One that sticks out is Cameron is so tight that if you stuck a lump of coal up his ass in 2 weeks, you'd have a diamond. And the way that he says 2 weeks, I don't know why he says it like that, but it will always be said like that in my head because of this movie.
There's a scene where they're at the baseball game and they look at each other and Ferris says to Cameron, do you realize if we played by the rules right now, we would be in gym? Then they just cut to the guy sweating. You just remember running that mile in gym and the guy is on the tractor. Come on, guys, you'll never get out of here. What they have versus what they would be doing if they hadn't have picked this day. And then I think my other is call the police. Must be a hoot. Just the word hoot, and he is just so like he's on screen for maybe 5 minutes of the movie, but he's so good, and just that entire interaction, him needing to play off that he's the sausage king, so well executed. So mine are a little bit more subtle, definitely not yearbook quotes, but I think they just play into scenes that I really love.
I have a runner-up when he's playing the clarinet and then says like, all right, one lesson. I feel like that is something that my roommate and I used to say a lot, but I think I also just always love back and forth when his mother says like, I assure you, he's really like a very sick boy. And just the way that they cut to that. Yeah. Oh my God. I love it.
Oh my God.
So good.
I just thought of maybe 3 lines that are probably all my favorite, but I'm just going to rattle them off quick. The one when Cameron is doing the impression of Sloane's dad, and he's like, well, I should say you do. And then he's like, when a family member dies and you insult me, what the hell is the matter with you anyway? That is just burned into my brain. And then a line that I realized I'm like, oh, this is actually a really cool line that would be a good yearbook quote is, only the meek get pinched, the bold survive. Actually a great line. Like when they're
really good.
His dad in front of the restaurant. And then also when he's in the restaurant and he says, I love driving it. It's so choice.
I feel like we didn't even really talk about the French restaurant scene by the entire thing. Them leaving and then being in the cab and being stuck next to him later on. It just continuously gets better and better. I think I said this to Thomas recently when we were talking about this movie. I love the mundane interaction that Ferris's dad is having with the 2 business guys. He's like just so broadly, again, more capitalism bullshit, but he's like, no, you gotta spend money if you want to make money.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he,
great
throws
point.
him in the cab, and then he goes, "You bonehead."
Yes.
His dad is just such a guy, just who you don't know what he does, but you do know what he does
business.
At the same time. He works in business.
Yeah.
He literally sees him like 3 times and doesn't recognize his own son and like doesn't recognize Sloane. Like he's so out to lunch. Yeah. I love also when he calls the dad and he's pretending to be sick and he's talking to his son and the dad is like waiting for him to come off hold and he's just like picking his teeth and then he cuts back. He's like, yeah. He like comes right back. A quote that is really always confounded me in this movie, and it's kind of an important quote, but it's just like I don't know what it means, and I wanted to hear what you guys think. It's when Cameron's talking to Sloane and they're walking in that like nice moment when Ferris is on the thing, and she's like, "What are you gonna do?" And he's like, "What is Ferris gonna do?" And he says he's gonna be a fry cook at Venus, and I think that's what he says. That he says a fry cook at Venus. And I was always like, what the hell does that mean? Like, is he mean Venus, the planet? But he says at Venus instead of on Venus. I've always been so confused by that line.
I've never really known what that means, but I think it would make sense if he was saying he was going to be a fry cook on another planet, because he's just
That's what it means. Like, he's
just
just so
such
crazy.
yeah. He's very unpredictable.
It's so weird, but yeah, I kind of interpreted it in the same way as Laura, in that like he would do something as outrageous as like be on another planet, but yet doing something like totally unexpected.
Yeah.
Slash
It's just
silly.
like a weird line.
Yeah.
Very weird. I don't know, maybe John Hughes was a fry cook and he also likes space. So that's what he sees himself doing. So I feel like we talked so much about scenes that we've loved throughout, but if you had to pick one that you think kind of won this movie, what would you pick, Thomas?
I mean, for me, it's probably just still like the Cameron fake call. I just think that sequence, it works. It works self-contained. Like, you don't have to know really the movie for that scene to still build the tension in the right ways and to like lure you down one path and then still be funny. And it's just like, and the music timing with everything is just great. And then I think the scene when they're rewinding the car, and what I love about that scene is that the sound of the car is sort of just humming underneath all of it, and it just adds this like tension to what is already a pretty dramatic, like hefty scene where they're talking about like the fate of Cameron basically, and like his dad and everything, and they're arguing about it, and then there's that little like 80s song playing up in the back. So those are definitely my two favorite scenes that I could just watch on YouTube and just get the same amount of joy out of.
Shaw, what about you?
I have a hard time saying anything other than the phone scene. It's been interesting in doing these podcasts. I feel like we've come away from most of them being able to kind of identify an iconic scene from the movie, or the way I like to look at it is, if I were to be describing the movie to a friend and only have time to show them one scene, what is a scene that I would choose? And in this movie, that would be like a really easy answer. And then, I said this already, but I think my runner-up would be the shower scene.
All right, we all have the same, because I have to say that one's my favorite. One thing I do want to say about that scene, I think I talked a little bit about the interaction when they start fighting, but also this back and forth where Ferris is kind of cheering him on. He's like, "You're doing great. You're doing great." And Cameron's getting so excited, and it's just so cute. He's like, "Oh, you're perfect. You're perfect." And it's this like adorable thing that they have where, he's so grateful that he's doing something, but he's also being such a horrible person for making him do it. But I think you get so much from such a simple concept of someone having a conversation with each other on the phone, because you have, I feel like I still talk on the phone a good amount without FaceTime, but you can't really see what's going on the other end of the phone. So I think it just adds so much to the scene to have other characters who are kind of doing other things, but are also indirectly involved in the conversation. I just love how flustered Rooney gets, and he's just kind of waving Grace to like help him, and he's freaking out, and why are there so many papers all over the place? Like, they're trying to figure out what room she's in. I guess that's like what they needed to do back then, like look through schedules and figure out what room she was in. But at that point, the nurse had already gotten her, so I don't even know what else was needed. Oh my God, it's just executed so perfectly. And then I just said this, but I think my runner-up has to be the restaurant scene, probably because it involves another ridiculous phone call, and just Cameron, like that scene kind of ending before they sit at the table with Cameron saying, "Hello, this is Sergeant Peterson," and him just being able to like use another ridiculous accent. But I also love the cut of that scene of them just sitting at the table, and it pans to each of their faces, giving him such a shit grin of like, "Oh, we got you now. We tricked you." But also the OCD in me always thinks like, well, what about when Abe Froman shows up?
I know. Another stressful moment.
Yeah, what happened to Abe Froman? He just luckily didn't show up to his reservation that day, and they got to have the lunch.
And I love that Cameron just goes, "Come on, Abe," and they just keep calling him Abe. But it also just speaks volumes to like who Ferris is, that he refused to give up during that situation, because he's just being so ridiculous. But such a good scene.
Have either of you ever had a Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Have you cut school and gone to do anything fun?
I totally get why they would want to do this because it looked like such a beautiful day out. And I remember having days towards the ends of senior year and being like, oh, I can't believe I have to sit inside all day. I just want to go to the beach. People would cut and go to the beach, but I never did because I'm a rule follower.
The rule followers.
We're all rule followers, I guess.
I had a sort of a situation that would be this, like if you took study hall and we had a rotating schedule and it worked out, you'd have like a 3-hour block for lunch on a certain day. As like I think I was a junior, but because I wasn't a senior, because I wasn't allowed to leave the school grounds during lunch, even though we had this huge gap. So we obviously always did, but if you got back in time, you could get away with it. But this one time, me and my friends all had like the triple lunch, and we drove into New York City, which is about a 20-minute drive from my town. And we got like lunch just like right over the bridge somewhere stupidly, and then like jetted back. And you know what we got was like this halal truck that was like really popular, even though in retrospect it was probably like really crappy, like falafel kind of whatever food. But like, we just thought it was the coolest thing to do because we were 16. And we got back to like school like 5 or 10 minutes late. And our administrator, who was not unlike a Rooney figure, who genuinely relished in like punishing kids, he was like waiting at like the thing, and he like took all our names, and I got detention, the only time I got detention. And then when they sent the letter home that I got detention, I had to like steal it from my mailbox so that my mom didn't find out. So it wasn't as cool as Ferris's Day Off, but I did.
No, that's cool. You went into
got
into
shawarma.
the Big Apple.
Shawarma in Harlem or something.
You like went as far into the city as you could go to then get back in time, which makes it so much better because it's so realistic. So your parents never found out?
So they did. I intercepted the letter, but they like sent another one, and my mom found out somehow, even though I tried my best to like intercept the letter that they sent. And
I can't believe they sent two. It's a little much.
Or she got like an email too, and I like didn't think of that. It was like stupid. But yeah, my mom knew that I got detention.
Not as aloof as Mrs. Bueller.
No.
She wasn't trying to sell a home to the Vermont people.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Michelle, what about you?
I haven't ever done this, but Jimmy literally cut school and went to a day baseball game with his girlfriend and a friend. He didn't watch the movie with me last night, but he was kind of coming in and out of the room, and he kind of made a similar comment that we all did about like Ferris kind of being a jerk and like not being a good friend, and like he was kind of talking down about him. And I'm like, Jimmy, but like you did this, like you lived a Ferris Bueller's Day. But he very much downplays it.
This movie does not really show that much food in it, but I guess I'll ask you, Michelle, is there anything that this movie really makes you want to eat?
I want Oreos. I think there are certain foods that like if I see it in any context, I will want it. And I think Oreos is like just at the top of my personal list. So the second I saw him eating those Oreos, I was like, I need that now. Not with Pepsi though. That was a bad pairing. Too much sugar.
I second that. I am a lifelong fan of Oreos. My Oreos and Ferris Bueller kind of go hand in hand in terms of childhood like nostalgic memories for me, and also in terms of things that I still enjoy to this day. And yeah, that scene it's probably like, what other scenes did they even eat during? Like, I'm trying to even think. Like
the baseball game. Like it makes me want to eat greasy food, but it mostly, I would say for me, it just makes me want to have a cold Pepsi because when she's drinking the Pepsi at the pizza parlor. But they also just show, I think, soda throughout the movie, but I think it's more consumerism.
Soda movie.
Thomas, it's funny. I don't know why I just had this memory, but the first time I went to your house, I remember you brought out Oreos. You were like, Laura, you want some Oreos? I was like, hell yeah, I want some Oreos.
What a great thing to offer your guests when they walk in the door.
I was like, wow, this guy knows what's up.
Keeping Oreos stocked at our house.
Wow.
I had many late night sleepovers where we would sit up in the kitchen and eat like a sleeve of Oreos and have milk at like 2 a.m.
That sounds great.
So your parents were strict like us when picking what movies you wanted to watch, but our parents would not buy us Oreos.
No.
So
Not at
they
all.
definitely have a one-up.
No, my mom was a big snacks that are terrible for you, but we like them.
Okay, so Michelle, I'm gonna give you one person. What do you can set up the scene as you normally do if you want to, but main point, what would you make them? And I'm gonna give you Ed Rooney.
Oh, Ed.
Ed.
I'm not a big meat eater, but he seems like he could be like a meat and potatoes type of person, just like really basic, whatever his mom would have made him like, as a kid and like a teen. So maybe something like I'm assuming this takes place in the 80s, so he maybe grew up like in the 50s, maybe something like a pot roast, which I have no idea how to make, but I think, a pot roast, potatoes, a glass of milk, and maybe make him eat some vegetables. And I think that he would be satisfied with that.
Oh, that sounds like such a horrible dinner.
Yeah, but he's a horrible dinner for a horrible person. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not doing anything special.
But maybe those little carrots.
Yeah, but like overcooked.
Like, yeah, really.
I'm picturing like microwaved peas.
Yeah. Maybe even just like a TV dinner.
TV dinner.
He looks like he would eat TV dinner. He blots his pizza before he eats it, so I'm just saying. He's right out of there.
Like he blots his head.
Yeah.
All right, Thomas, you have to host Jeannie Bueller. What are you making her? Oh, and at the last minute, you didn't invite him, but she's bringing Charlie Sheen.
Okay, now that I would love to have them over for dinner. I don't know what I would make though. Let me think about it. Jeannie, I feel like she had those like 80s leggings with the socks. I feel like she was kind of like athletic. Like she was like something like healthy. But this is the 80s, so there wasn't like kale salads. Like that wasn't a popular thing. Maybe a Caesar salad with grilled chicken.
Okay.
And croutons. And like a Pepsi to drink.
All right.
I can definitely see her.
This was Charlie Sheen's eating. I was gonna say you should just save him. You could just serve him a plate of drugs.
Yeah, he's gonna just take drugs.
I'm just picturing you giving him a bowl
Being
of
here for
pills,
drugs.
and you guys just smoking weed together, and then like ordering pizza or something.
On half-ass internet research, apparently Charlie Sheen like didn't sleep for like a few days to prepare for this role, so that he looked really drugged out and had this really like crazy disposition.
That's method acting right there.
I believe, because he looked horrible.
He looks so bad. I can't believe she wanted to make out with him.
But he also had that sort of like equanimity that someone that hasn't slept in many days or has just been through a horrible experience will have, where he's just sort of like very lucid and like in the moment. But yeah, I would just have them have grilled chicken Caesar salad.
Now I want a Caesar salad, and then I want Oreos. Hold the pot roast.
Okay, so I have to give Laura a character.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm gonna have to give you the French restaurant guy.
Oh, that's hard because he's gonna. I actually wonder though, are people who work at really nice restaurants, do they like expect their food? I feel like the most important thing to him would be when he gets there, everything needs to be like perfectly placed. I need to have cloth napkins, and the forks need to be carefully placed on the right side of the plate, like if you're going to like a presidential dinner. I think he would be more concerned about that than the actual food. I'd probably make him some type of like fish dish, but very simple, not big portions. It only takes up like a little bit of the plate in the center with some type of sauce garnish. So maybe like a prawns with like a nice juicy side.
Prawns are perfect for that guy.
Yeah, he would definitely prawns,
what I
but
think of.
but he would have the eyeballs on it, and he's like, oh, I want to, cut this up myself. And then probably like a very expensive bottle of red wine. I'd also give him a side salad as part of this, but a French side salad, so very basic, like spring mix with a mustard, lemon, olive oil, vinaigrette with some chopped up shallots. Keep it simple, and maybe some bread on the side, like a crusty bread, because the French love their baguettes. Do we think that he's French?
I think he wants to be French, but I don't think he is.
French.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into our this or that segment for Ferris Bueller. Michelle, I'm going to start off. I'm going to give you 5.
Okay.
Okay, let me know when you're ready, Ferris.
I'm ready.
Okay, would you rather run the mile in gym class or sit through English? This should be an easy one for you.
Definitely sit through English.
Of course. Would you rather eat fancy French restaurant pancreas or a baseball game hot dog?
I think a baseball game hot dog.
Okay, this checks out for you. Would you rather get attacked by the Bueller's fight dog or get attacked by Jeannie?
Yikes. I guess by Jeannie, because I think if a dog attacked me, I would not be able to fight back.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to fight. I wouldn't want to hurt an animal.
Okay, what do you think is a better excuse or an excuse that you would use to skip out on school? A dead grandmother, or you have the flu for like the 8th time this year?
I think dead grandmother.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that was a solid choice by them. Would you rather wreck your dad's favorite, very expensive car or get picked up by the cops for a phony phone call?
I think wreck the car because...
Really?
Wow. I mean, if I'm going by like our dad, I think he would be much more upset if we got arrested than if we ruined. I mean, I can't think of anything that he owns that he would be that much more upset than if we got arrested.
This is true.
Sticking with parents. If you were skipping school, would you rather have your mom or your dad be the one to catch you? This is assuming that they're not telling the other one. They're going to keep it a secret. I feel like there's a very easy answer here.
I think I'd rather mom, honestly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like she would be like, let's take the day off.
She would instigate it. If anyone in our family was going to have a movie made about them taking a day off and sneaking out and doing something, it would be mom.
Agree.
On your day off, would you rather go to a museum or a baseball game?
I think a museum, because I'm such a rule follower, and I think I would be too afraid that I would get shown on the Jumbotron or on TV.
All right. Would you rather sing on a float in a parade or prank call your principal during the school day?
I think prank phone call. And not that it would be more enjoyable or thrilling, but I would just be too nervous, and I don't have a great singing voice, so I don't think I could pull that off.
Which would you rather get as a gift, a car or a computer?
A car. I like Jeannie's car too. It's not too flashy, it's just, and it seems like it drives fast. Okay, guys, and for our next episode release of our back to school season, we are going to be taking a trip to Orange County to cover the movie Orange County.
Also named Orange County.
And we are going to have a special guest on. You definitely know her from a lot of our past episode releases, our sister Lisa. So make sure you tune in.
Yeah, they should make a movie, him, Cameron, but in the future, as an adult and what he's doing.
Ferris too.
Or maybe he turned into his dad because he's in Succession and he's obsessed with money and he's kind of a horrible person.
Morris.
He becomes Morris in the future.
I bet he didn't go to college. I bet he didn't end up going.
I could see him going to a 2-year community, and then I could see him working at there's no signs that he plays instruments, but I don't know why I could see him working at a guitar store.
Maybe he became the museum curator at that art museum because he was so moved by that painting.
Beautiful museum. Crowded, but beautiful.